the Upstate New York chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame induction ceremony. It is my great pleasure and honor to be here today. It is pleasing that so many of you have turned out to see the class of 2019 get inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, as well as honor other recipients with special awards. Thank you all for being here. This is an afternoon to learn about the many noteworthy accomplishments, and it is also a time to boast about them. Dr. Tom, would you please join me on the podium? Please welcome Dr. Tom Martin, board member.
Okay, thank you, Bob. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Upstate New York National Wrestling Hall of Fame chapter, I want to welcome everyone to this year's ceremony. We as a board consider this the marquee event of the year, where we honor those who have contributed so much to our sport of wrestling. We want to thank all those involved in the preparation for this day for your time and effort, as without your support, this event would not be possible. A special thank you to our president, Carl Koenig, as his time and effort have made this event so special to all the honorees for many years. We also want to say thank you again to Bob Zivchak, our dependable MC. He has orchestrated this annual and ensured the success of this event every year. We want to also offer a special note of thanks to Betsy Weissman, Pat Green, Carl, and Bob for all their efforts and time producing our honorees' bios, which capture the essence and significance of those chosen to be honored here today. Many thanks to Tim Herman, Frank and Roberta Marotta for organizing the photography that captures forever the memories of this day for the honorees and their family and friends. Finally, we also want to extend our extreme gratitude to those who gave financially, who have supported and support the chapter and the sport of wrestling, as without your support today would not be possible. When you have a chance, please take a moment to visit our webpage. It's packed with wrestling-related pictures, postings, comments, and interesting materials for visitors to absorb. Again, we say to all in attendance, a heartfelt thank you for being a part of today's special event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. I'd also like to just have you stay right there a moment and help me with this next task. Let us now recognize and welcome those past honorees and distinguished members who are in attendance of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. I would ask that you hold your applause until the last person is introduced. Those honorees in attendance, we will call your name out one at a time. Please just stand in your place, and when we're all done, then we'll have a nice round of applause for all our past honorees in attendance. Let us begin. Rick Armstrong.
Dave Alvald, distinguished member.
Don Blaine.
Fred Brown, Board of Directors.
Ed Carlin.
Wayne Carroll.
Jeff Quilty.
Steve Fishbein.
Stan Alinsky, Board of Directors.
Pat Green, Board of Directors.
Sonny Greenlaw, Order of Merit.
Joe Gustintinus.
Rick Gumbel.
Pete Hosrock, Board of Directors.
Brad Hammer.
Reed Hoff, Board of Directors.
Mike Hogan, Board of Directors.
Jim Howard, Board of Directors.
Leo Johnson.
John Kopelek, Board of Directors.
Jack LeBombard, Board of Directors.
Fred Marcello.
Frank Marotta, Board of Directors.
Joe McCabe.
Dr. Tom Martin, Board of Directors.
Frank Millard.
Gene Mills, Distinguished Member.
Don New.
Dr. Frank Oliveri.
Tony Pollacker.
Donald J. Quinn.
Sparky Rector.
Marty Sherman.
Bill Smith.
Sonia Stanbro.
Bob Stuhlmaker.
Gene Tracy.
Orlando Turco.
Bill White.
Bob Zivchak, Board of Directors.
Let us welcome them and give them a round of applause. Let us now show our enthusiasm and greet the class of 2019. I will invite them in one at a time. First honoree, Paul Cummings. Logan. Don Quinn. Anthony Cervidone. Mark Cody. Tim Jenks. Brian Tompkins. Gentlemen, if I could ask you to bear with me one moment as we present the colors. The presentation of colors is by U.S. Naval Recruiter Petty Officer, Second Class, Jordan Vermette. Jordan, please present. Let me invite Natalie Barrows to sing our national anthem. Natalie, please come forward. Please stand to honor America.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Natalie. Please remain standing. Let me next invite up Frank Murata for the invocation. Frank, if you would, please. I was looking for you.
Since our last banquet in September, Upstate New York chapter member Walt Peterson, Downstate chapter member Tom Riccio, and outstanding contributor Linda Canutala, wife of board member Eric Canutala, passed away. Please join me in a moment of silence in their memory and in the memory of others in the wrestling community who have passed away. Thank you. Lord, we thank you for making these great people part of our lives. Please continue to comfort their families. Almighty God, thank you for the blessings you've bestowed on us and for this opportunity to honor all of our award winners for their devotion to our great sport of wrestling. Please bless the Hall of Fame directors and the past inductees who have worked to preserve this great event. We ask your blessing on all the wrestling wives and families. Long careers in coaching, officiating, or contributing to wrestling would be impossible without their support, their loyalty. Bless the wrestlers and help them stay focused and healthy as they work to achieve their goals. Please help them to build strong character and guide them to always demonstrate good sportsmanship, even when situations are difficult. Lord, we pray that you give strength and comfort to those who have had to endure tragedies. Please look after our Hall of Fame members who have been battling some serious issues. We pray that you protect those who serve in our armed forces and law enforcement and in firefighting. Please keep them safe as they work to keep us safe. And finally, we ask you to bless today's proceedings, this time we have together, those who have prepared and served our dinner, and bless this food to our bodies. Amen. Amen.
Thank you. Please take your seats. Gentlemen, honorees, take your seats as well.
Father's name. I'd like to recognize all the other people here who are become outstanding wrestlers and participate in wrestling for years and years and years. When Carl asked me to present the Robert H. Feldmeyer Outstanding Wrestler of the Year Award again this year, as a non-wrestler, I began to wonder why my father felt that wrestling was one of the best sports in the world for building character. David, Matt, and Kim, all three of them wrestled. When asked what they, so I called the family, talked to their mother, and when asked what they learned from wrestling, and if there was anything different with the boys and the girls, their mother told me that she felt that wrestling taught discipline, commitment, and focus. That her children learned what it was like to work through hunger, thirst, as well as pain and injuries. That it is so important for young men and women to learn how to handle themselves during a physical confrontation, and that's what wrestling teaches. Matt, one of her sons, who became a Green Beret, said wrestling taught him mental toughness, and that at every stage in his life so far, the men he has met who were wrestlers always seem to hold themselves together to a higher standard and know what it is like to work through tough times and physical challenges. Kim, the only girl on her team, said it taught me confidence, discipline, and independence. That she learned to take ownership for individual mistakes, losses, and learned to stand up for equality and for women's rights. My son-in-law Kevin wrestled, and he echoes this statement. Wrestling is different from most sports. You may be part of a team, but when the time comes, it's just you and your opponent. You can't relent, you can't hide behind other teammates and hope they pick up your slack. It is just you and your opponent. Kevin said he lost his very first match. He said, I kind of was crying. And he was crushed for himself and for his team. Today, this year's Wrestler of the Year, Outstanding Wrestler of the Year, Jake Logan, is at Lehigh University participating in a wrestling clinic. It must have been a tough decision for him to make, to be there and not here to receive his award. Yet wrestlers have learned to make tough decisions. Academically, Jake is at the top 3% of his class, and in the 2019 wrestling season, he was our section champ and was undefeated at 39-0 at 182 pounds. I might add, he was also section champ in 2016 and 2018. There's a lot more written about him in the program and in the lobby. I am proud to present the Robert Feldmeyer Outstanding Wrestler Award to Jake Logan. Thank you.
To accept on behalf of Jake, Sam Acapelli. Sam, would you come forward? Thank you, Gene. Sam, if you just stay there a moment. Thank you, Gene. Go ahead. Jake was also our nominee for the Dave Schultz Award. Each chapter sends a nomination into the national, and the national decides who's going to win the Schultz Award. So we're also presenting that to Jake, so I have a plaque for you on that behalf too. Thank you. All right, on to dinner. Let's go. Let's have something to eat, huh? Enjoy. Mike had a very difficult decision to make. He sent Carl and I both an email explaining why his presence wasn't going to be here today. He had a family commitment, which was a wedding. And as he said in his email to us, that this is killing me. I would rather be here with you. However, to keep the peace at home, I better go to the wedding. So we'd like to thank and honor Mike right now. I know he's not here, and we'll make other plans to honor him later. So, Mike, hats off to you for the Stanro Media Award. Let us begin. Our first honoree is Paul Cummings' Lifetime Service. The presenter is Steve Garland. Steve, please come forward.
I can't believe I'm kicking it off. This is it's a lot of pressure, man. But for those who don't know, I'm actually, well, I guess you will know, right? Because I wrestled for Coach. But I'm from New York. I'm a proud New Yorker, but I've been down south a long time, too long. I've been told twice tonight that I actually, or today, that I lost my accent. That hurt my heart. It hurt my heart because I don't get up enough as much as I should, as much as I'd like to. But the first thing I wanted to say is thanks for having me because I love being around you guys. I mean, you guys are a trip. I love being in upstate New York. I love being around, hearing the accents and just being around people that I grew up around. I mean, I bumped into Coach Sisha and Wayne Carroll and Don New. These are guys that I looked up to when I was growing up. So it's kind of, it's really an honor to be here. And secondly, it's an honor to be here presenting for Coach Cummings because I was joking at the table, but with a coach like him, he's been a part of the worst moments of my life and the best moments of my life. And so there's a bond there that's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of hard to put into words. And so, Coach, thank you so much. I can't tell you how honored I am to be up here speaking on your behalf. And as I said, I've been down south for, gosh, a long time now. I've been the head coach at the University of Virginia now for 14 years. And I've been in college coaching now for 20 years. And in that time, hopefully I've learned something. You know, I'm still stupid, but hopefully I've learned something. And I think if I had to sum up the three things that I feel like student athletes need most, the three things that they need most and that I think secretly they want most, these three things. One, they want something to believe in. Two, they want somebody to believe in them. And three, they want guardrails. They actually want rules. They say they don't, but they do. And with Coach Cummings, he hit on all three of those things with me, and it's impacted me more than I can ever really explain in the time limit we have. But the first one, having something to believe in. I knew when I walked into that practice room that Coach had a plan. I remember walking that little dungeon, that little office you used to have where you were just crushing it, Coach. I mean, meticulously planning, every detail worked out to the minute of what we were going to be doing. And here's the thing, why we were going to be doing it. So in other words, I bought what he was selling. When I walked into the practice room, I knew that I was going to get better because I believed in what he was doing. He gave me something to look to and say, that's who I want to be. I want to be just like that. And for me to reach my goals, I have to be like him. And so I became the crazy guy that was doing the runs, Doug, right? When everybody else was doing nothing, we're running on what'd you say, the snow days. We're out running in blizzards and doing things that when nobody was looking, I was planning and preparing. And that's carried me all the way through my coaching career in Division I. All because of that, Coach. You gave me something to believe in. Number two, and this is most important, he believed in me. He believed in me. And it may sound like, okay, well, he's supposed to believe in you as his coach. Well, you guys should have known how bad I was and how small I was and how nobody believed in me. I mean, shoot, I don't think anybody did. That crazy guy did. And so when I stepped on the mat, I really believed I was going to win because he thought I was going to win. I remember my first big win ever. It took me forever. I wasn't even a starter my freshman year in high school. I finally get a big win in 10th grade, and you're the only crazy guy in the gym that thought I was going to win. I remember being in the locker room with him. I was like, Coach, did you think that was going to happen? I was like, I can't believe I just beat that dude. I didn't know. And he was like, what do you mean? He was like, shocked, you know? He really believed in me, and it's something that, at the end of the day, I would say that's the most important thing you ever did for me, Coach. You ever did for me was that in my whole career. So I was in a contract year this year, and I'm getting emails and text messages from Coach Cummings. You're going to do it. They're crazy. There's no way they're firing you. You're coming back. Every round at Nationals, my guys in the NCAA finals this year, and Coach is hitting me up. And this is what's crazy about the impact this man's had in my life. You know, he's probably the only male on earth that I even care what he thinks. Seriously. He's like the only guy. There's 19,000 people at the Nationals. He's the only guy I cared about what he said. The only text message, I got hundreds of them after that final, or the semifinal win. You're the only one that I actually gave a crap about. And that shows you how much I love you. And, yeah. And lastly, the guardrails. So I won't crush myself too much, but I was a delinquent animal, to sum it up best, when Coach got a hold of me. My twin brother, and I have a twin brother, believe it or not, and we were a lot to handle. And Coach one time, very respectfully and lovingly, double fish hooked me in practice to put me in my place. And I remember watching, I guess you can't do that nowadays. But back then, that was right up the old coaching tree there. And I'll never forget it. And I never disrespected you again, to my knowledge, you know. But he was the guy that we looked to. I didn't have a dad in the picture. Most of my team, our high school team was pretty rough. I think most of us, if we did have a dad in the picture, it was a rough situation. So Coach became that for us. So I could talk all day, and Gary's gonna get mad. He gets mad when you go too long on these things. Apparently, he's big on that. So if I had to sum it all up, I'd say this: really, our profession, the coaching profession, is about one thing. It's about impact. It's about impact. And Coach, more than you'll ever know. I mean, I heard Billy Graham say once that the coach will impact more lives in a year than the average person will impact in a lifetime. The coach will impact more lives in a year than most people have an opportunity to impact in a lifetime. So Coach, you've impacted a lifetime's worth of people, well beyond me. All the guys, all those delinquents that you got through, all the things you poured into us. There's not enough time in the day, there's not enough hours to tell you how much you've impacted us. So Coach, I love you, man. Truly. And just thank you for everything you ever did for us, for all of us. And I got a tagline I got to end on, supposedly. So let us now welcome Paul Cummings for induction into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, now and forever.
Wow, how do I follow that? Hello, Steve. Steve, you have made this day extra special for me, taking time out of your busy schedule to be my presenter. Your words, your thoughts, I am deeply moved. You will never know how so proud I am of you. Thank you. Let me just brag a little bit about Steve for a moment. We all know that Steve is a two-time New York State runner-up and an NCAA finalist, one of 3 from Section 9. The other 2 being the Bannock brothers, who are now members of the National Hall of Fame. He is a Virginia Cavalier All-American, and his first 12 seasons as a Virginia coach, the Cavaliers earned 10 All-American honors and 17 ACC individual titles, while qualifying 71 to the NCAA championships and recording top 25 team finishes at NCAA in 6 of the last 9 years, winning 2 ACC championships in 2010-15. But do you know about Steve's 30 for 30 moment? Do you know about this young man's ability to overcome? The very reason I love to coach and coach young men who have used wrestling to work through hardships in their lives. Whether driven by anger, desire, or simply fueled by naysayers, wrestlers are constantly proving people wrong. What you don't know about Steve is that he was a premature twin, weighing only 2 pounds at birth and nearly died. As a freshman in high school, Steve weighed, soaking wet, about 75 pounds, not lying. During our certification process back then, a school doctor had to approve your weight class. Our doctor was new and was refusing to certify Steve at the 91-pound weight class because he only weighed 75 pounds. I'm like, he's giving up the weight. He's fine with that. Nope, too light. He's gonna get hurt and then I'm gonna be sued. The words that we hear so many times. Steve was upset. That's all he ever heard. You're tiny, you're skinny, words a high school freshman doesn't want to ever hear. I assured the doctor that we would put 10 pounds on Steve the next go around at the certification. Steve looked at me like, yeah, I wish I could put 10 pounds on. But that's exactly what we did. We didn't lie. We put a 10-pound plate right in his singlet and he's certified for that weight class. Right now, Donnie Blaine's saying, hey, that's true, that's illegal. I should have won some more matches up in his... So, even after becoming a 2-time finalist at the States in Syracuse, no college coach called. Not a letter, not even a coach's visit. Programs would say, he will never wrestle in college. He will never be big enough for the 118-pound weight class. But never tell Steve Garland or a wrestler with passion and goals that they can't. Wrestling is about the little guy, the underdog. Steve's unique story is what makes wrestling great. Each wrestler has their own set of unique circumstances. That's what I miss and love the most about coaching wrestling. When most young people search and decide and wonder what they will do for a career, I knew at a very young age what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to teach and coach wrestling. It was my life. It was my passion. It was all-consuming, and I couldn't get enough. And as I reflect over the past 30 years, it wasn't always fun. It was a lot of hard work, stress, headaches. Coaching wrestling, and plain and simply, is a long, slow grind. And at the completion of every year, I contemplated, why am I doing this? What person puts themselves through this emotional roller coaster of extremes, highs and lows? Wrestlers do. Day in and day out, they work, get up, get hurt, and fail. And every day, they get up and restart. This is the very heart of what I love about this sport and why we need more young people exposed. Our young people today do not understand the grind, the term work ethic, and how very important it is to fail, get up, and start over, work harder, try harder. In a nutshell, this is what we as coaches and wrestlers do every day. We need more of these life lessons instilled in our young people, even more today. Winning is only a small portion of the overall experience of wrestling in comparison to the entire building of character that coaches instill in every team member. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. We hear so many times wrestler and wrestling's our extended family. This is so true in my life with both families, driving me crazy at times. But we love them. Thanksgiving practice with one, onto Thanksgiving dinner with another. Seriously, I love Section 9, where I was lucky enough to wrestle and coach and learn so much from the great coaches I have had and competed against. Their dedication and desire to make wrestling better in their respective programs made me better as a coach. Coach Blaine, Coach Fishbein, Coach Quilty, Coach Gunnar DeJong, Coach Gallagher, Coach Zipchuk, and Coach Shisha. As some of you know, thank you. As some of you know, I have now crossed over to the dark side and have begun my career in officiating. They are now officially my step family. And coaches, on a side note, they are just as crazy as we are, but with way more power, as you know. My fellow officials, thanks for taking me in with open arms. Someday, I hope to be worthy enough to rep in the big match. Thank you, Wayne. I was blessed with 3 boys, all who wrestled for me. Notice I said blessed with boys, but not blessed for having to have coached them. Coaching wrestling is intense in itself, but when the wrestler is genetically connected to you, it's a whole new ballgame. It is the most amazing, wonderful, crazy, lunatic thing to do that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but I loved every second and wouldn't have missed it for the world. Thank you, boys. To my sons Corey, Kenny, and Colin, thanks for dealing with your crazy dad, not only as a coach, but as a teacher in the same school. Poor kids. I'm so lucky my boys have been exposed to wrestling. They have learned to fail and grind and reap the benefits of working hard in their lives. They are wrestling tough. To the greatest assistant coach in my life, my wife, Jennifer, for all your love, support, your dedication to your family, your loyalty to your husband and children is unsurpassed. Even when my boys began their intermittent fasting, she always stayed calm and supported the head coach. She is by far the toughest one in the house. And finally, thanks to my dad, who had 2 major milestones in his life this year. He just turned 80 this month and has been a pastor at the same church for the past 50 years. I'm just tired thinking about working for 50 years with people. Yes, I am the preacher's son, and to some degree we do the same thing. We encourage, we change minds to believe, and instill confidence. Just know, there was a lot more swearing in my back room. Dad, you taught me how to grind. You taught me how to never give up, and always, always do everything with passion. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for listening and sharing this special day with me.
Paul Cummings, lifetime service. On to our next honoree, Cedar Real, lifetime service, presenter John Kapolik. John, please come forward.
You're all in trouble now, it's story time. Greetings, wrestling people. Our next inductee is Mr. Pete Rayo, and I'm going to take you to a far different place. I hope everyone had a pleasant drive here. Sunny degrees, sunny 80 degrees, the birds are singing, the bees are humming, but I want to use your imagination and take you to a very different place. You just left the tournament in East Lansing or East Strasburg, or Bloomsburg, or State College, or NYU, or Army, or wherever, after a 12-hour workday on your feet. You're driving home through the Alleghenies, or the Catskills, or the Poconos, and now it's 60 degrees colder than today, and there's no daylight, and it's 2 a.m., and you're all alone on the interstate. And it's snowing and blowing near whiteout conditions, or freezing rain and ice. Your only desire is to get home alive, and it will be a challenge. Now, you may have thought that the only danger for officials was irate coaches and rabid fans. And this has been Pete Rayo's experience for 31 seasons. Pete's journey started quite early. He was born into a wrestling family. His father was the late Pete Rayo. He was an outstanding wrestling and football coach in Western New York. His dad was a Buffalo grad, a four-sport athlete, a UB Hall of Famer. So Pete had a lot to live up to. Many highways Pete has traveled. He's wrestled, coached, mentored, and officiated several hundred tournaments. Over his long career, Pete began wrestling as a youth. Fast forward to becoming a two-time captain of the UB Bulls, where he achieved All-American status as a 158-pounder. And just so that you know, Pete wasn't hanging out in high school. He competed in gymnastics, and he earned the bronze medal in New York State in the still rings. Pete's toured the Midwest and Northeast in his officiating role, and perhaps you've seen his work on flow wrestling or track. But without further ado, let me introduce a family man, a businessman, the latest inductee into the New York State Upstate Wrestling Hall of Fame, now and forever, from Tonawanda, New York, Mr. Pete Rayo.
John. I met John probably halfway through my career. He called me out of the blue and told me he was an alumni. And we've been friends since then. And everywhere I go, I want to just show you this. And who knew that Tony Orlando was a referee? I get that more often than not. I just, over the years, 31 years of reffing, I tell my wife I have lines because people have said the same thing to me, and I found the best thing and the best answer that's either neutral or just a little bit humorous. And I said, I may look like Tony Orlando, but trust me, you don't want to hear me sing. My mom and dad were both educators. My father was a phys ed teacher and a coach for wrestling, football, track. I think he played baseball, but we don't talk about that too much. And I was the little 5-year-old on the bench, the ball boy, the water boy. And I used to go to Saturday practice. I play with my coloring books and things until he eventually taught me a few things of wrestling. And my first recollection was going to Niagara Community College, County Community College, and I don't think Eric Manula was old enough to be the coach there, but I was probably about 8 or 9. I wasn't really a wrestling fan, and my father was a coach at Lewiston Porter High School. They were green, so I had a green singlet that he gave me, a pair of leather Adidas shoes, and a green headgear, and I'm sure I looked like a bobblehead. It was oversized varsity equipment. The one perk about being a coach or a phys ed teacher's kid is we got all the school's junk stuff. We had trampolines and parallel bars and rings, and I don't know what we did with the basketball man. Never played basketball, but so I went out there and I didn't want to wrestle. I didn't like the sport, and of course we ran into the kid I had to wrestle. I had one kid in my weight class, and of course my dad knew his father. I think they were both phys ed teachers or something. And I went out there and he had taught me a cross-face cradle, so I got on top, I hit my cross-face cradle, and I pinned my opponent. And I said, gee, maybe I do like this sport. So that was my first epiphany of when I became interested, or I knew wrestling was going to be something I wanted to stay with. I went on to wrestle in high school, I think for Joe Shiflett, who's also a New York State Hall of Famer, and then Ed Michael over at the University of Buffalo, and had the fortune of wrestling 4 years. It was Division III, but I think back then we had a very competitive Division III team. And then went on right to being a grad coach and getting married. And once you change your direction in life, things change. And my dad came up to me and said, why don't you start officiating? So it took a couple of years because they kind of blocked new officials, but I got involved with one of the other Western New York referees, probably one of the best ever, and we traveled a lot to Ithaca, Cornell, Binghamton, Rochester, and we talked wrestling and officiating for years and years and years. And one of the things I learned is sportsmanship is probably one of the biggest things that I like to make sure it happens in wrestling. We should never get rid of the handshake before and after the match. And I think over the course of all the years that I've refereed, one of the things that I hope that I conveyed is that when you get me on the mat, I'm going to be the fair guy. I don't care if it's a Buffalo guy, and it was my alma mater. I once got accused of reverse home jobbing, that I was too tough on the Buffalo guys. I don't know if that's true, but Don Murray would disagree. I think I wanted to be the guy that when your son or daughter was on the mat, I would be the guy that you'd want out there knowing that you're going to get a fair shake. And I hope over the 31 years that I've done this, that I've conveyed that. And I know a lot of people who know me. This is why I'm up here. I'm not the guy up here because I've done 10 championships and worked in Division I's in the MAC tournament or the NWHOFs. If you look at my bio, I don't have those. I'm the guy that shows up, does those long drives, does the job, gets a handshake and takes off and goes to the next one. The sport of wrestling has been absolutely fabulous to me. And the only way I can do it, if anyone's met my wife, she's absolutely fantastic. she's you can't ask for anybody better who supports me. She's heard all my stories a million times and still smiles and laughs, and they really are bad. I want to thank, and my mom for helping me get to all the events. With my dad, they never missed an event. They were always the parents that were in the crowd, even my brother tagging along. If you were at a UB event back in the early 80s, if there were 15 people watching, that would have been a lot. Today, I'm glad to see that that's changed. Wrestling has grown, it's more exciting. Our new rules seem to be helping the sport grow. And I hope that the people that I've taught, that I've watched ref, and are coming up, I actually hear some of my lines come back to me sometimes, and I have to laugh because kids are using them today, and I hope they come out and they approach officiating with sportsmanship and fairness involved. I want to thank everybody because this is a fabulous honor to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Peter Rail, lifetime service. Our next honoree, Steve Delbreth, lifetime service. Presenter, Colton Delbreth. Colton, please come forward. You.
Wow. If you guys thought nerves were bad before a wrestling match, don't expect to do a Hall of Fame speech in front of everyone. No, thank you all for coming out here. It's truly an honor to get to introduce these honorees tonight. It is truly a blessing to get to introduce this next inductee, my father, Stephen Delbreth. It goes without saying, Steve's attributes and contribution to this sport are noteworthy in themselves. Through his years, he's been an official, the Section 5 rules interpreter, the New York State rules interpreter, editor of the Green Book, wrestling coach and mentor. Not only has he impacted this sport on a local level, but at a national level as well. His love, dedication, and selflessness are all big reasons he's earned so much respect in this wrestling community. I've personally witnessed the sacrifices he has made for this sport. And if you know Steve, that's saying a lot, because that's time and money he could have invested into his peanut collection or his pets collection. He would be the first to tell you, wrestling's a tough sport. 2 scratched corneas, 2 knee surgeries, 2 ankle sprains, a chipped elbow, been punched in the head, escorted out by the cops numerous times. And this is just talking about his officiating career. But for as long as I can remember, when everyone came up to me, they always had the same remarks to Steve. That guy's awesome to watch referee. They were so excited to see him take the mat. There was a few that said, he's a little too showboaty or he's too flashy. But the truth is, that was Steve. Always giving his all. Always went out there and went above and beyond what was asked. There's 2 things you can guarantee when it comes to Steve. 1, anything he's going to do, he's going to be over the top. And 2, his Puma shoes are always going to match whatever outfit he's wearing. Of course, it's only fair to give some credit to his biggest supporter and wife, Dawn. Without her help, I'd be pretty certain we'd all still be waiting for the 2016 Green Book to be finished type. Of course, we can talk about every kid I've ever wrestled in the score, and he could say verbatim any rules, but it's still a challenge for him to remember what day to take that trash out. Dad, as your son, I get to experience a side of you that I find most impressive. You introduced me to a sport that has been deeply embedded in my roots and made me the person I am today. You instilled in me your work ethic, taught me that if you're going to do something, be committed and be confident. I cherish the time we spend together and the opportunity to grow together in this sport. I cannot think of anyone that deserves this award enough. I love you incredibly much. Without further ado, let us now welcome Disco Dan himself for introduction to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame now and forever, Mr. Stephen Delbreth.
Yeah, Disco Dan, right? Thanks. That actually has been my nickname since 1980. I mean, my nickname of Disco Dan lasted longer than actual disco. Well, I asked somebody else, I said, why do you guys always call me Disco Dan? And they said, you know, when you referee, you look like you're dancing, man. And I was like, I started to think about that. You know, it's really kind of true because if you've ever watched Saturday Night Fever, watch some of the moves Travolta makes. You know how he's going like this? That's a reversal, man. You know how he's going like this? You see it, right? Now, check this out. Potentially dangerous, illegal. Is this not the Macarena? So it wasn't my fault, and I can't get rid of that nickname. First of all, my name is Steve, not Dan. And even as recent as last year, guy came up to me at the state tournament and said, hey, nice going, Dan. So there's an awful lot of people out there that really think my name is Dan, so thanks for bringing that up, by the way. And his talking about my peanut collection, that sounds so stupid. I collect memorabilia from the Planters Peanut Company. I have thousands of pieces, and yeah, I'm a grown-ass man and I'm collecting peanut stuff, so excuse me. And because dispensers. Look, I found out that I was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I spoke to one of my friends who never can give me a break. I said, hey, they're going to put me in the Hall of Fame. And I'm a little scared because I got to get up and talk in front of people. He goes, what are you worried about? I said, I'm not too good at it. He says, you refereed for 35 years and you were good at that. And this guy's a busting a job, right? I was the #1 rated official in Section 5, 10 years in a row. And he goes, that's not because you were good. The other guys were worse than you. Yeah, I see all my buddies over in that corner there. Those are a lot of my referee friends, and they put them all in one spot so they could keep an eye on them, I think. All right? I'm glad you guys can make it. You know, they're a good bunch of guys, and over the course of my lifetime, I've gotten an opportunity to work with some of the best in the business, some of the greatest officials you'd ever want to work with. Always making the right call, always in the right position, crisp hand signals, and I also worked with those guys. And I'm very pleased that my friend Dave could be here. Dave and Sharon Borelli, my good friends. If you guys think Dave looks familiar, he's a probation officer. That's why. And my good friend Larry, thanks for coming, Larry. And you know, I worked with Larry for 25 years and we've never had a fight or never said a harsh word with each other. You couldn't ask for a better friend than Larry. I've been asking for one for 25 years, Larry. All right, so let me tell you a little story about me. First of all, I'd like to say this. It is astonishing to me that I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame. There are no words that I can use to describe the emotions that went through me when I received the phone call saying that I was going to be inducted. It's such a humbling feeling to look at the list of names of the people that are in the Hall of Fame and go, my name is going to be mentioned in the same sentence as those guys? Oh my God. And I noticed that the plaque didn't say Disco Dan, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, I'd like to also say that it wasn't possible for me to even be here if it weren't for the help of a whole lot of people. I can tell you, Frank Murata, the man that gave the invocation, he has been by my side since the time I was 20 years old and started refereeing. He's always been there to help me along the way. And since I became the New York State Rules Interpreter, we have spent hours at my kitchen table with Frank on one side of me, correcting my spelling, and my wife on the other side, typing it up. And without those two, he's not kidding. If you want to see me type, this is the finger I use. And it's awful. It's awful. And my wife, in addition to doing the typing, she's been able to accomplish some major things. She taught me how to send a text message, and I can email all by myself now. So I thank you for that, Dawn. And you know, Dawn, you're the love of my life. And I really appreciate everything that you've done for me. And if there was a Hall of Fame for wives, I would definitely nominate you to be in it. Okay? With that being said, if you would do me a favor, from now on, when you introduce me to people, could you please refer to me as your Hall of Fame husband? All right? Let me tell you a little story how I got started. I'm a freshman in high school and I weighed 80 pounds. I'm minding my own business. This big lug comes up to me and says, we need a small kid to wrestle 98. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to go home and watch Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas with my mother. All right? He goes, no, you don't get it. I'm telling you, you're going to sign up for wrestling. I wasn't asking you to sign up for wrestling. You see, in 1970, you know the bullying rules they have today? They didn't have those rules. So I said to myself, am I going to fight this guy? And what would you do? I joined the wrestling team. I walk in the room and I see a bunch of numbers. I've never been to a wrestling match in my life. I see all these numbers on the wall, 98, 105, 112. And under each one there's names. And I figure out real quick, these are the weight classes, and those are the kids that are trying out, and there's no name under 98. It took me 3 seconds to formulate this in my head. If I try out for this team, I'll be the varsity guy. I'm gonna get a varsity letter. And I've been watching these upperclassmen walking around with their varsity club coats. I'm gonna get a varsity club coat, and I'm gonna get a hot girlfriend. So I make it through this, and I'm telling you, this I was terrible because I sucked. I was really bad, and I had an excuse. I could say, I'm only 80 pounds, right? So I had this built-in excuse. And the coach said, don't worry about it. We know you're not good at this. Here's the deal, Steve. They always called me Steve, right? This is the deal. This time, pins are 5 points. Decisions are 3 points. Just don't get pinned. You go out there, you save us points, you're golden. And some days, they may not have a 98-pounder, and you'll get a forfeit. What's a forfeit? That means you just go out, they raise your hand, and I go, that counts as a win? Yeah. Oh, I want one of those. So, I'm working on this whole don't get pinned thing. So, now I was fortunate to be blessed with teammates that knew that my job was to not get pinned. And so they made sure that for the majority of my practice time, I was on my back fighting off. It was very accommodating. And I'm not telling you, they're kind of mean, really. They really taught me how to not get pinned. And it worked because if you're on your back all the time, you develop little tricks. I had this goofy headgear, and it was real slippery, and I could get in the high bridge and slide out of bounds. Your refs never call that. Right? So, I remember I used to come home all the time, because my goal is don't get pinned. If I don't win, I don't win. I come home, my father says, how'd you do tonight? I did pretty good. I didn't get pinned. And it just went on and on and on. One day I got a forfeit. Okay. I come home, my father says, how'd you do? I won. Now look, my father's 89 years old. Don't tell him all 4 wins were forfeits. Come on, right? All 4 wins were forfeits. I ended up with 4 wins my freshman year. But the good news is, as time went on, I wrestled 98 for the next 3 years. I wrestled 105 as a senior. I had a growth spurt. And I know what you're thinking. What? I really had a growth spurt.
You know, Steve, I can listen all day to these stories, but it's time. It's time. I hate to do this to you. It's time, Steve.
All right. Hey, without any further ado, thank you very much, and I appreciate this honor. And listen, I hope that I leave the sport of wrestling better for knowing me, because I'm leaving the sport of wrestling better for knowing it. Thank you.
Our next honoree is Don Quinn, Outstanding American. Presenter Donald J. Quinn.
I'd like to, first of all, I know my family is very nervous because when they give a 50-year-old time to talk, I have a lot of stories. And I've been very common that I give a lot of stories and they go on for up about 5 minutes and you're out of here, so I better get going. I'm very happy be here tonight to give the Outstanding American Award, or announce the Outstanding Award. And I'd like to talk about 4 traits that he has many good traits, but these 4 I stand out in my mind. 1 is love and respect for others. I've never heard him, even as a little boy, because he wrestled for me, complain about a coach or a teacher or another student, and that's unusual at that age, so he must have been born with that technique. He had strong work ethics because wrestling, for me, was tough, I can assure you. And discipline, he gained discipline because, as somebody mentioned earlier, in order to make the team, he had to sweat down 2 weight classes every week. And that was tough. And although the food bill wasn't very high when he was wrestling, which was a good point. And the last thing is his love for Jesus Christ. And the person I'm recommending is my son, Don. I'll give you a little history on him. He was selected as the Outstanding American, and he participated in high school football and wrestling, which required a great deal of discipline and hard work. After graduation from East Rochester, he attended the Naval Academy where he wrestled for 2 years. Upon graduation, he served in the United States Navy for about 35 and a half years. I've been paying his bill ever since, all the way along. And during this time, he was actively involved in Desert Storm. Don retired from the Navy as a 2-star Rear Admiral. Since retirement, he has been serving his church as a lector, the Eucharistic minister, church council member, and is in charge of behavioral counseling. He makes many visits to the elderly, administering the Eucharist on weekly basis. As you can see, he serves many well, including his wife Jean, his 4 children, and 8 grandchildren. Let me welcome my son Don, who I'm very proud of, as the Outstanding American for induction into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, now and forever.
Well, thanks, Dad. I think that's the shortest speech I've ever heard you give. Thanks to the Hall of Fame Selection Committee for this honor. I'm humbled to stand in the company of many of my heroes, including my dad, from the sport I loved. But let me be clear. I view this award as affirmation of the life lessons and traits that wrestling instills in its participants, much more than my recognition of my meager exploits in it. As my dad and my teammates would attest, I worked very hard just to become an average wrestler. And my wrestling journey took an awful toll on my dad. He's actually only 59. But look at all that wear and tear. I can't let this opportunity pass without publicly thanking my parents for their patience, support, and faith, which served as the example and produced the foundation for everything I've done in this life. Dad, I love you, and I'm proud of you. Sam Morbido, assistant coach, a man who wrote a letter for me to get into the Naval Academy, and I think he needed a calculator to actually score some of my matches. And yes, I had that same move, getting off the edge of the mat. And then, of course, Commander Mike Ruth and his wife Barb. Mike was a mentor to me when I considered going to the Naval Academy, and he also flew in naval aviation. When I was thinking about going another way, he actually jumped in an airplane in California, flew all the way to Maryland, reminded me that my parents were married to each other, and I should not go that way. So this award is really about you coaches, officials, and organizers.
and supporters who make this sport what it is. The lessons learned by its participants are portable to any career they choose. I drew upon them often in my military career. In fact, the more senior I became and the more responsibility I was given, the more relevant my wrestling lessons became. Command can be very lonely, just like stepping out into the mat. We actively recruit athletes for naval aviation because we know they've lost at some point and had to get back up, dust themselves off, and throw themselves back into the contest. Today we call that resilience. And wrestlers in particular make great naval aviators because in the airplane, just like on the mat, there's no one else to blame but yourself. And no matter how good you are, there are flights when the airplane, the weather, your performance, or enemy actions cause the mission not to go as planned. You cannot go to the corner until it gets better. You must quickly shrug off the disappointment, rely upon your hours of practice and study, and continue the mission. Downwind at night, abeam the carrier, you've got about 30 seconds to shrug off an unsuccessful landing attempt and ready yourself for the next one. I'm a military officer, and therefore a lifelong student of the art of leadership. So I'll add that while athletics and athletes are focused on winning, which is good, causing you to set high goals and work toward them, the best life lessons come from losses. As a naval officer, my best opportunity to teach a subordinate came after failure. Ask any coach. When you lose, your sense of invisibility is damaged, and you're much more receptive to coaching. So thank you all who have coached, officiated, or organized wrestling matches and tournaments. I thank my dad for the lessons that I learned at home, in the pit, and on the mat. But I challenge all of you still engaged in this sport to consider how you can better use losses to prepare young men for life. Consider how you can turn lemons into lemonade to make that young man stronger, more resilient, and ready to take on new wrestling challenges and new life challenges. My faith in God and my experiences in wrestling did that for me. I believe that is what this award celebrates, and I'm happy and humbled to accept it on behalf of the sport that enabled me to go about 4 pay grades higher in the Navy than my wildest dreams. May God bless you all, and may He continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Looks like we're sharing a microphone. Outstanding American Rear Admiral Don Quinn. Thank you very much. That's why we have 2 of them up here. Our next honoree, Anthony Servidone, lifetime service, presenter Bob Crane. Bob.
Everyone who went before me, I was hoping that somebody would stumble, fumble. Everyone's done a fantastic job, so you're making my job even harder. Thank you for setting the bar so high, Steve. I feel like this needs to be energetic. So, Anthony Servidone in 320 words or more. Hopefully, nobody's counting. I'd like to start by just saying what an honor it is to present such an outstanding individual. I'd like to thank the board for this opportunity to present one of my best friends. I cannot think of a more deserving person for this award. I've known Anthony as a teammate, as a coach, as a colleague, and in all those areas he has exceeded our expectations. To our student athletes,
Anthony has been a teacher, a mentor, a coach, and of course, a therapist. Anthony tells our kids to win every day. He teaches, he coaches, he mentors, he guides, he encourages, and he pushes them to be better in life every day and better on the mat. Anthony's mission and mantra at the end of every practice is family first, then academics, then athletics third. I actually had the luxury of having Anthony coach my own son, and I tell our parents every day there is no better advocate for your student athlete than Anthony Servidone. With all that said, Anthony's been able to accomplish all of his accolades without ever having a horse in the race, so to speak. You know, he never had a child in our program, and he would tell us, I get 45 new kids every year. I don't need to have kids. Everything that Anthony does is for his true love of the sport and concern for those kids. I got back into wrestling because I missed it. I loved the sport, I missed it, but I never would have gotten my wife and family to buy into those 4 months of nights, weekends, missed meals, missed holidays, without having had my son involved. I have a funny story about Anthony. He was dating a woman during wrestling season one year, and he gets up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday morning to go to a wrestling tournament, and she says, geez, when do you think you'll be home? He says, 10:30, 11 o'clock. She says, that's not bad. Obviously, she thought a.m. So when Anthony rolled off the bus that evening at 11 p.m., you can only imagine how that went. I do not have to recall all of Anthony's accolades because they are laid out in the program, and they would be too numerous for me to count up here today. But what is interesting, and I think needs to be brought to everybody's attention, is that Anthony was only out of high school a year and a half or 2 years when he was asked to take over the program. And had he not stepped up and taken over our wrestling program, it would have gone defunct. He took it over with no wrestling experience, and over the years has served at almost every level. He's been a youth coach, he's been a modified coach, he's been a JV coach, he's been a head coach. Some of those more than once. Anthony never takes a season off. I recall back in '04, he coached football, which started probably late July, rolled right into wrestling, where he coached Justin Hellwig to a state championship. Wrestling ended, he went right into baseball and took the baseball team to a state championship. That is the kind of dedication that he has for the sport and for the kids. He spent more time that year at banquets and being honored by the Board of Education than he spent at home. Anthony comes from an outstanding family, and he could have pursued many other avenues in life. He chose to shape young minds, and that is exactly what he's done. I know personally that I am a better person for the years that I have gotten to spend. Anthony is very reluctant to take credit for any of his accomplishments. But one funny little story that few people know about Anthony is that he was the originator of the fist bump. Not a famous athlete, not anything else, and I'll tell you how it happened. We were in Bennington, Vermont at the Mount Anthony duels, and we were wrestling a lesser team, and we were handling them pretty well. And we had a kid coming up, and his name was Bobby Fish. Fish is a terrible last name for a wrestler, but that's a whole nother story. And so we have our guy up, and he's ready to go on the mat, and we look across, and their coach is standing there, but there's no kid there. And I look at Anthony, I go, geez, they got a name in the book. And we look over, the coach yells out some kid's name, nobody shows up or whatever. Anthony and I look over, there's two kids leaning up against the wall or whatever. One kid is buried to the third knuckle in his nose, just digging for gold. So that kid jumps up and he comes out, and I'm like, oh wow, all right. So our kid dispatches of him rather quickly, and I look at Anthony and I said, I'm not shaking his hand. And so I I start fumbling around through the med kit trying to look busy. I should have been looking for gloves, but I'm fumbling around, and I just kind of look up like this to see how Anthony's going to handle this. And without ever skipping a beat, Anthony looks at the kid and goes, "Knuckles." The kid goes, Anthony goes, "Knuckles." So I look up, Anthony bumps Knuckles with him, and I said, "Well played, well played." So, without further ado, let us welcome Anthony Servodome for induction into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame now and forever.
Wow, these have been outstanding introductions and speeches this afternoon. I want to thank Carl Koenig and the entire staff that puts this together every year. It's such a fine event. To my fellow inductees, congratulations to you all for an outstanding class. It's an honor to be in your presence. Okay, I'll read along here. This past January, when I received the news of being inducted to the Upstate New York National Wrestling Hall of Fame, I paused briefly and said to myself, how is this even possible? And as I gathered my thoughts and reflected some, I realized it was possible because of those who were in my life and for the athletes I've been fortunate to coach. I'm extremely blessed to have such a loving, caring, and supportive family. My family has provided me with many life learning skills, but most of all, they taught me how to handle myself with dignity, humility, and most importantly, respect. I can't thank you enough, Mom, Dad, and my brother Mark. Without you, none of this would ever be possible. To all my family and friends who are here present today, and some have traveled long distances, thank you. You're all very special to me in so many ways. I've been fortunate to take part in the sport of wrestling as a wrestler, an official, and coach. The sport has been a tool to shape my life and has provided me with so many opportunities. I love coaching wrestling so much that I got into teaching and now a physical education teacher for the past 20 years. My coaching journey began in the winter of 1988. I was just a junior in college. My alma mater, Columbia High School in Section 2, was in need of a wrestling coach. At the time, I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had a little bit more hair back then. I didn't need readers. But 32 years later, I'm still there. I'm at the same school where I started. Along my wrestling coaching journey, I've been absolutely grateful to have so many outstanding people come into my life. While it's nearly impossible to acknowledge all of them, I certainly like to recognize those who continue to make an impact in my life. One of them is here tonight. My mentor, starting with Hall of Famer Joe McCabe. Joe, raise your hand. Joe's still coaching today with us. He just turned 80 back in May. So it's a great opportunity to have Joe be my mentor. And the other being Joe DeMeo, both Hall of Famers. My Columbia Wrestling coaching colleagues. I've been super lucky to work with so many seasons. Bob Crane, Jim McHugh, Joe McCabe, Brandon Lapp, Michael Marriage, Joe Denisio, Joe DeMeo, Brendan Morgan, Adam Hewlett, and so many more. Thank you. I'm accepting this award for all of us. None of our wrestling successes, on or off the mat, would ever be possible without all of you. I'm forever grateful to you guys. Thank you. To my New York USA Wrestling Board, I know Rick Gummel's in attendance tonight. Thank you. It's just been an absolute pleasure to work with you. I've been fortunate to travel around the country coaching freestyle and Greco-Roman teams. It's just been super. So thank you very much. Through this great sport of wrestling, I've received my greatest gifts that anything can ever provide. It wasn't the wins, it wasn't championships, rather it was friendships. Friendships I've developed along my journey. These are the friends who I stay in touch with me all the time, and not just during wrestling season. They're friends that are there for the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, the ones that always offer support, help, and are truly loyal. They will always be my family through our great sport of wrestling and have had an impact on my life. I'd like to acknowledge my close wrestling family and friends who are here today. Jim Morgan, Dave Kress, Jim and Maureen McHugh, Bob and Pam Helwig, Eric Hart, Jim Devine, Bob and Stacy Crane, Mike Marriage, Brandon Lapp, Ron Annis, and fellow Wrestling Hall of Famers Pat Green and Sonny Greenhalgh. Thank you for everything. As I near conclusion today, I want to mention that this past winter and spring was the most challenging time in both my personal life and coaching career. I was facing adversity head on in so many ways. Among them was a tragic loss to a popular former wrestler we had at Columbia, who just completed his junior year of college at Virginia Tech University. My phone was blowing up that day with calls and texts from so many of my wrestlers and families saying they're just grieving so hard, and they were looking to me for some comfort and how to handle this. With little time to digest it and what to do and how to handle all that adversity, I knew I had to be strong and supportive to Laura grieving so badly. It was what I learned through my family values in wrestling that I leaned on so heavily to deliver messages from my heart to support all of them. The life tools the sport of wrestling taught me, such as the will to persevere, to have self-discipline, mental toughness, determination, and the absolute will to battle through anything, are priceless. In closing, my journey has been one heck of a ride and is still fun today. I'm one lucky coach and truly blessed to have all my family and friends in my life. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you for lifetime service. Our next honoree, Mark Cody, lifetime service. His presenter, David Cody. Please come forward.
Good afternoon. In 2011, when Mark was named National Division I Coach of the Year, our sister Michelle reminded him of our grandfather's prediction when we were kids that our mischievous and, shall we say, unstudious brother Mark would go further than any of his siblings. We would have had to know Mark at the time, or better yet, been one of his school teachers to appreciate just how bold a prediction Grandpa was making. But all these years later, lo and behold, Grandpa was right. In wrestling circles, Mark is known as a program builder. In 2003, he took over an American University team on life support, and over the next 8 years gave the school its first individual national champion in any sport, Johnson City's Josh Glenn, and led the team to a 5th place finish in the NCAA tournament. In 2011, he was chosen to return the storied University of Oklahoma program to national prominence, a task he accomplished with 4 top 13 finishes in 5 years. Now, as the capstone of his distinguished coaching career, Mark has been selected by South Carolina's Presbyterian College to establish the nation's first Division I women's wrestling program. Directly related to his success as a coach is the fact that Mark is, as his wife Holly and their 4 sons would attest, first and foremost, a family man. When it's done right, building a team is like building a family. The same qualities of trust and loyalty, commitment and hard work, sincerity and humor, openness and love are integral to both. His possession of those qualities is the reason that you don't have to be related to Mark by blood to feel that you're a member of his family. So I'm here to tell him today how proud those of us who are lucky enough, whether through blood or affection, to be part of his family are of him. Let us now welcome Mark Cody for induction into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Now and forever, Mark Cody.
Well, thank you. Congratulations to all the inductees. This is very special, and of course I knew a lot about the career of a lot of the inductees because over the years I've been a bit of a fan of the sport too, as well as a historian, so I know the story on a lot of people that are sitting in front of me. Even if I don't know you personally, I know a lot about what you've done and what you've done in the sport. And congratulations to everybody, because there's a lot of people in this room that have touched a lot of lives. And that's what we do as coaches, and that's why we coach. And everybody got into wrestling for different reasons. I tried out for basketball, the CYO basketball in 7th grade. After going in cold turkey, I got cut. There was a room up above the gym, and all the players were down there on tryout day, and the coach up in that room would call you up if you didn't make the team. So the first year, sure enough, I get called up there, and I got sent packing. The next year, I trained for a week. I trained out in my driveway with my brother Dave. He set up a couple garbage cans, and I dribbled around the garbage cans and worked on my shot. The basketball hoop that we had was lopsided, so it was like training at the carnival. So it wasn't the best situation for me for my training. But sure enough, I thought I was going to make the team that second year. I go out there, and sure enough, I have some great practices leading up to it. And coach goes up in the room up top in the bird's nest, and I didn't hear my name for the first 5. I'm there shooting away and didn't hear my name. Then all of a sudden I heard Mark Cody, and I just kept shooting. I just kept shooting and pretended if I don't pay attention to that, sooner or later it's going to go away. And sure enough, I got called upstairs and got sent packing. So I walk out. A few weeks later, a friend of mine, a lifelong friend of mine, Mike Gill, who was sitting right back here, he actually introduced me to wrestling, and he took me to wrestling practice. And the good thing about wrestling and for me is that they didn't make cuts. So and everybody that's been a part of that knows we don't cut in the sport of wrestling. We might be 2 or 3 people deep in the sport, but we don't make cuts. So I at that point got introduced to Bill Layton. Now that was a late start compared to a lot of people. I was in 8th grade at the time, just kind of the end of 8th grade, and Bill Layton. If anyone has been coached by Bill Layton, or directly or indirectly, please put your hand up. If you've been coached by Bill Layton directly or indirectly, and that's a lot of people. A lot of people have been touched by Bill Layton. He was an unbelievable technician, and so got me, caught up pretty quick. But the problem was with the sport that in the sport of wrestling, you have to have the balance of a gymnast, and you have to have the strength of a weightlifter. You have to have the heart of a cross-country runner, and you have to have the strategic mind of a chess player. None of those attributes did I have, but I did have the work ethic, and I worked very hard at it. First year, like a lot of people, it was ugly. I wrestled 112 pounds and got pounded every time because I thought cutting weight was the way to go, and then eventually I'd gotten it figured out. So my senior year in high school, obviously the phone wasn't ringing off the hook. I won a sectional championship, but I wasn't getting recruited by anybody. I got invited by Dave Turco, who was a good friend of mine, wrestled at Ithaca High School, to come with him on a recruiting trip to Delhi. So when I had gotten there, Coach was, showing Turco around, and I was around with him. And at the end of the visit, Coach Millard said to Dave Turco, he said, "Well, we'd really love to have you, and Cody, you can come too." So, so Turco ended up going to Brockport, and I ended up at Delhi. And it was the best decision that I ever made. Going to Delhi, in high school, like Bill Layton was a very technical coach, but if you lost, it was usually blamed on a technique or a decision that you had made a bad decision during a match. But sometimes I didn't have enough strength or enough endurance to carry a lot of that out. So once I go to Delhi, I get this coach named Frank Millard, who is just unbelievable technically. He's a right setup technical coach, and man, did he demand that you were in shape and that you were strong. And he made sure everybody was. So right from day one, we started off with about 60 kids. And in a hurry, that got down to about 25 athletes, because Coach was trying to see who was in and who was out. But it was just incredible to go there and have the partners that I had that really helped out my career, and to have an unbelievable coach that I had. He created a great atmosphere. I have never wrestled in the packed gym. From there, I went to Missouri to wrestle. It was not like Delhi. Delhi was a packed gym. Every time you went in there, there were great crowds, so it was a lot of fun to walk out there. Frank Millard, we were part of a national record there that was a lot of fun, national dual meet record for wins. And the amazing thing about the atmosphere, the coaching, he did it all by himself. He was the only coach that we had. He did not have a staff, which was incredible to me. At the end of my career, I was hoping to go into a Division I school, and I had hurt myself. I broke my neck my sophomore year, and so I was out of it. And I came back another semester to finish school, and coach said, if you can get things going again, I can reach out to some people and try to get maybe get your career back on track, depending on how your neck heals up. So I got cleared from a doctor, and coach wrote letters to just about every school in the country. So I was able to get back out there and get recruited again, and had a decent career in college. But fast forward going down to coaching, I think that's one of the reasons I decided to do it, because I was in such amazement with what Frank Millard could do and what I could see also from the technique that I had from Bill Layton being such a technical coach. Years later I decided to go to Oklahoma State and train with some of the top guys in the country, and then that's how I decided that I would get into coaching. Since then I've had a lot of fun at it. I've had a great, many relationships that I've built through coaching, and really enjoyed that part of it. I just couldn't be happier with being where I am now, being at Presbyterian College, being the first part of the first Division I women's program is pretty special. I think it's going to do a lot for the sport of wrestling. I think it's going to help a lot on the men's side. So we have 20 men and 20 women on the team right now. Some of our women are some of the top women in the country. I think they want it to be a part of something special, part of a Division I program. But throughout this whole journey, I've been through a lot as a coach. Like I said, I've been through a lot of different programs. But I just want to give acknowledgement to my wife. She had mentioned this morning. She goes, I wasn't with you for a lot of your coaching career. We were not together. Well, that was kind of interesting to me that she said that, because I thought to myself, this career hasn't really been as special as it is without her being in my life. I just want to let her know that you make me so proud. You're such a blessing. You inspire me. You are absolutely amazing. My boys, George, Charlie, Norman, and Henry, those are good old Midwestern names. They have no idea right now of the amount of happiness that they bring me, and patience. Again, congratulations to all the honorees. I just want to mention Carl Koenig, the most organized human being I've ever met in my life. I'd be remiss to not mention Sonny Greenhall too, who's also my coach at New York Athletic Club, and did a lot for me, and enabled me to travel all over the country, and to be able to build on a freestyle career, and able to help me help young student athletes with their freestyle careers right now. So again, congratulations to all the honorees. I'm very proud to be a part of the New York State Upstate Wrestling Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Mark Cody, lifetime service. Our next honoree, Tim Jenks, lifetime service. The presenter, Jack Harble. Jack, come forward.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start off by thanking Mr. Jenks. It's an honor to be up here for him, with him. Try not to get emotional. First of all, wrestling in Green. For those of you who don't know, Green is a very small, kind of a one-horse town. There was a handful of things to do in Green, and lucky for me, one of them was wrestling. The other four were against the athletic code of conduct. I excelled at those as well. I want to start off by sharing my earliest memory of Coach Jenks. It came when I was my first youth wrestling practice. As a third grader, standing with my father outside the wrestling room doors, listening to the sounds coming from that room. I questioned my father's judgment. Why am I here? I started asking questions. What's going on in that room? My father didn't say a word. All right, as the doors opened, the varsity team came out. I remember watching the young men come out of the room. They looked terrible. They smelled worse. Again, my father says nothing and pushes me through the doors. But then as I go through the doors, I remember seeing this figure over in the back right corner. This is Mr. Jenks. See, growing up in Greene, we didn't have cable television, we didn't have internet. I think some people got the paper, but we sure didn't. Mr. Jenks to me was a superhero. His arms were bigger than my body. All right, he had muscles on top of muscles. All right, when he first spoke, I realized he was in fact real. All right, so I started running towards him as fast as I could to get next to him. Of course, I tripped, but I got there. When he finally stood up and he introduced himself, and I'm sure he said something about the sport of wrestling, and and practice began. As he walked past me, he placed his hand on my head, and I'm sure he said something great, but I was still in awe. All right, it was that day that I quickly fell in love with the sport of wrestling, and the man teaching it. But lucky for me, I learned everything I needed to know about the sport of wrestling in one day. It was the day my father dropped me off at Oxford for the Clyde Cole tournament. I think I was 10 years old. And I quickly found myself traveling with Coach Jenks from mat to mat as he was coaching his varsity wrestlers. So I stood there, first I'm hiding behind the chairs. Then each match went on, I'd get a little closer to him, get a little closer. Finally, he realized I was there. And just as a green wrestler gets pinned, he looks over at me and says, "Jack, don't ever step over a wizard." I was 10, didn't plan on it, but thanks. Didn't know what that was. A few matches later, I look over, another green wrestler's getting pinned. Mr. Jenks looks over at me and says, "When you run your half, you gotta get chest to chest, don't get too high, you'll get rolled." All right, much of the day, much like that. Each match, I'm sitting there, he's commenting to me about the sport of wrestling. And then I remember later in the day, I saw a green wrestler who was doing well, and Mr. Jenks was very excited, very animated, cheering for him. And all of a sudden, I saw something that I'd never seen before. The green wrestler had quit wrestling in the third period. And I looked over at Mr. Jenks and I saw a look of disappointment on his face. A look that I never wanted to see. I told myself, he'd never look at me that way. All right? I think in the semifinals, I remember Jim Megley's match. I don't know how I can't remember my wife's birthday, but I can remember watching Jim Megley win an overtime match in the semifinals, I believe. I remember looking at Mr. Jenks and seeing that look on his face. Mr. Jenks was so proud of Jim, and Jim was so proud of himself. I wanted Mr. Jenks to look at me that way. And the other thing I realized after that match was I never wanted to go into overtime, because when Jim won, Mr. Jenks picked him up and squeezed him so hard that if he ever did that to me, I'd die. So overtime was out of the question. All right. That same day, I was there, and I remember Mr. Jenks and an official, you may find this hard to believe, got into a little argument. As things became a little heated, all right, I saw this vein in Mr. Jenks' forehead. It began to bulge and pulsate. And then finally, after being at his side for 3 or 4 hours that day, I realized he had a man sitting next to him. And that man was Mike Wilcox. And Mike, Mr. Wilcox, seeing what's going on with Mr. Jenks and the official, did the right thing, of course, and he took a pair of headgear off the med kit and started fitting it to my head. And I'm like, what are you doing? It was then that I realized that he was covering my ears to protect me. So at that time, I knew that I also had Mr. Wilcox on my side. All right, and the last thing I want to share with you about that day, and this is all one day for a little 10-year-old. The last thing I want to share about that day was watching Mr. Jenks interact with his family. Mr. Jenks always greeted his father with a hug and his mother with a kiss. And Mrs. Jenks always brought the kids to the tournaments, matches, anywhere that he went. And that was hard for me because I then realized he wasn't a superhero. He was real. He had a family, and his family shared him with me. And not everybody has that family, but it was at that moment when I saw his family that I realized I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And I wanted my family to be like his. I still, guardrails, right? Yeah, I remember that from earlier. I still have the letter he wrote me 25 years ago. I don't have to refer to as much now as I did when through my 20s and 30s. But I will admit my wife will walk up and hand it to me every once in a while. No doubt in my mind that Tim Jenks is personally responsible for the father, husband, teacher, and coach that I am today. Having said that, please welcome Mr. Tim Jenks.
All right.
Wow. Whew. Hard to follow. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the inductees and the kind words that they said. It's hard to look at that table right there and not start laughing. So that was good that you did that. I gotta use my glasses. I gotta tell you about how ironic this is that Mr. Don Quinn was here, because he was the one that introduced me to wrestling in East Rochester. East Rochester. I went out for intramural wrestling. He introduced me to that. And then my father being a pastor, we moved quite a bit. But anyway, to get down to Shenango Forks and another guy named Ken Spinard, he was trying to get me to wrestle. And one day, and by the way, I'm a basketball family. My father's here. He's 85 years old, basketball. My brother played basketball. So I go, I don't know. So anyway, I'm looking at the introductions to this match, and I had Randy and Mark Payne. How many of you heard of those people? All right, I'm going like, everybody was talking about this match at Shenango Forks, and Dana Ellis is the state champion for Shenango Forks. I went to it, and it was electric. They had lights coming down, and a band played, and it was an event, and it was electric. And when I saw this Randy Payne kid wrestle, I said, I'm all in. I'm gonna wrestle. This is it. And I had a real, Ken Spinard was a Hall of Fame guy, a real crusty guy. I can tell you one quick story. He was kind of an animal, and which was a good thing, but he smoked a cigarette when he did a move, or showed you a move, you held the cigarette while he wrestled with the kid. And my father being a pastor, I just ignored it. And then one day, he had us all together before this huge match with Yui, and he says, I gotta tell you a biblical story. And I'm like, whoa, this guy's gonna tell a biblical story? And he says, yeah, I gotta tell you something right now. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. And I said, wow, that's pretty good. And he said, and I looked at him, I go, wow, wait till I tell my dad this. And he goes, you know why? I go, I don't know, maybe God. And he goes, no, I'm the toughest son of a bitch in the valley. So I went on from there, but he really was a great role model. Anyway, you had to feel that way in wrestling, And he really did make me feel that way, and all the people that came before me and I saw him wrestle, it motivated me. Well, yeah, Shenango Forks, I did real well. I'm not going to brag or anything, but anyway. Mr. Ed Collin, who's here, he comes in and he recruits me to Syracuse University. And then I met these group of people over here, which was probably the greatest thing in my life. It really was. But we had with Ed Collin, Tim Meredith, Guy Dugas, John Janiak was there, and oh great, Rotundo's not here, but he ended up being a WWF. I could tell stories of Gene Mills, John Tobias. I gotta look down here, but anyway, I thank Coach Collin for believing in me and getting a scholarship. John Janiak and Paul Heads over there. Sorry, did I miss anybody? Okay, they're all there. And Terry Green, which makes me laugh just looking at him. Okay. So anyway, I majored in biology and in physical education. I wanted to be, upon graduation, was the best decision other than, here it comes, marrying my wife. All right. Good job, I told you I'd trump that one guy over here was talking about his wife. And my kid, beautiful family, love their family. Upon graduation, I went to Harpersville, and at Harpersville, wrestling wasn't really that great. It was tough. I had this guy, and Pete Halsrath is here. The Sherburne-Oval match that I took my kids to, the first match we ever wrestled, I never sat down. I got up, they would get pinned, they'd come back out whining, whimpering, sitting down. Next kid would come up there and get smoked, and another kid, they were just getting smoked one after another. I had one kid go 6 minutes. It was the most embarrassing. I got back on the bus, I go, I'm never gonna do this again. It was so embarrassing. And it was a long day. So anyway, it was about 3 or 4 years later, I started recruiting. I got help from Sarge Sorchinsky. You remember that guy? And Huey and Tom Robertson of Sydney. They actually invited me to their practices. Even though I knew how to wrestle, it's a different than knowing how to coach. And got some skills together. Anyway, got together, came back, and we beat Sherburne-Oval. I don't know if he remembers that, but anyway, we finally did that. I want to thank and then I went to Green Central School and had all kinds of help. Mike Wilcox came in, another guy named Mike Introvatolo, not here, Andy Wilcox, Dave Castle, and then my best friend, or good friend of mine, and Tom Stambro comes walking in the door, and he becomes my assistant coach. We got 2 great coaches, to take care of our teams. And by the way, I kind of imitated those wrestling matches from Shenango Forks. It took a while, but Jack was took us 10 years to get a sectional champion. And Jack was our first. And after Jack, people said, hey, I think I can do that or something. I don't know. We ended up with 32 sectional champions. There was a lot of them that didn't make it. I got a kid that was undefeated here, Brett Kinney. Probably would be a state champion, probably be number 11. We had 11 state champions. We had 26 in the state place winners, and we could go on and on. But I just want to tell you, it wasn't so much about all the state champions. We had kids I would pick out or grab them out of, like Jack. And those kids were good. You took them in, sometimes they made it, sometimes they didn't, but it was the struggle that's more important. And it's not like we don't have to coach, we get to coach. And that was the greatest thing. And thank you, Jack, for saying that about me, those kind of words. Thank you very much.
Tim Gates, lifetime service. Our next honoree, Brian Tompkins, lifetime service. Presenter, Connor and Ryan Tompkins. Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Connor Tompkins. This is my younger brother, Ryan Tompkins. First and foremost, I want to thank the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Upstate New York chapter and the members of the board for making all this happen. I want to congratulate my father, Brian Tompkins, on his induction and for being the recipient of a Lifetime Service Award. If his career does not represent a lifetime of service, I don't know what does. Born and raised in Tarrytown, New York, graduate of Sleepy Hollow High School, where he lettered in football, wrestling, and lacrosse. Later attended Westchester University in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He competed in wrestling and diving while pursuing a degree in physical education, only to return to Sleepy Hollow High School shortly after graduating, where he started his coaching career in 1975. 1977, he was hired as a physical education teacher, and as they say, the rest is history. In his 44-year tenure of coaching at Sleepy Hollow High School, he's coached 33 Section 1 champions, 13 New York State place finishers, and 3 state champs. When asked how many dual matches he's won, his simple response would be, I don't know, a lot, I don't care. Although winning is very, very important to any coach that wishes to be competitive, it is not everything when it comes to my father. My brother and I have been a part of the program for as long as we can remember. Excuse me. Going from water boys to athletes and now his assistant coaches, even to this day, he enjoys the bond that is built between athletes and coach, and his number one goal as a coach is to produce champions at life and not just champions on the mat.
All right, I'll try and be quick here. So wrestling is an interesting sport. It's a controlled fight, as my dad would call it. It directly correlates hard work and success. 1 versus 1, no one to blame, no one to point your finger at but yourself. And let me just say, it's not an easy thing being coached by your father. I'm sure some people in this room have had that experience. Expectations were high, and he was tougher on my brother and I than any of our other teammates. We've had long car rides home after losses, dissecting our matches and critiquing our mistakes. He was also the type of father, I would come off the mat and be like, Cat, my elbow really hurts when I do this. And he would say, okay, don't do that. Get back out there. Like, all right. But we wouldn't have it any other way. We had the opportunity to be coached by someone who was passionate, caring, and tough. He taught us, as well as hundreds of other student athletes, the very meaning of that hard work pays off. My father has an uncanny ability to tap into the mindset of a student athlete and extract potential that kid never knew he had, including me and my brother. Teaching a kid how to take pride in himself and instill great confidence. We don't coach in the greatest of areas, and a lot of our kids don't have their parents at home, but he was always a father figure to those children. When I was a kid, I vividly remember having grown men come up to me and say, if it wasn't for your father, I would be dead or in prison by now. And that really stuck with me. It made me realize my father isn't only a great coach, but a great mentor and an even better father. Dad, me and Connor will do our best to keep the program going, and it's my honor to welcome my father, Brian Tompkins, to the National Wrestling Hall.
Thank you, guys. This sport is just an unbelievable sport, as we all know. That's why we're here. I want to thank my wife, my daughter, my son's girlfriend, Jasmine, and 2 other important friends of mine who were wrestlers for me, but also became my assistant coaches and really dear friends. This sport is the only 4 things that I really try to strive with kids is God first, family second, school third, and then the sport, which is really secondary. But again, I'm short on words, but thank you very much. Bob, thank you, old man.
Hey, old man.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Brian Tompkins, lifetime service. Before I bring this to a close, I have a few things to say. First, that's a common greeting Brian and I share is the hey old man, hey old man. We've been in business a long time together. So that was special from him. Reminder, honorees, your green jackets. Please, at the end of the ceremony, put your green jackets on, come up. We have a group photo with your green jackets. It's important because it's going to the into the National Hall of Fame. Also, your green jackets are significant. You should wear them when you're going to a national tournament, you're going to a state tournament. See your brothers wear them as well, and all the other people you're part of. So that's the significance of a green jacket. Request, I have a request. Please, those badges, those name badges you have, there'll be a box on the way out the door. Please return those name badges so we can use them next year on your way out the door. I want to thank this audience because as an MC, sometimes it's difficult to deal with audiences. I got to tell you, you are terrific. Thank you so much for being who you are. I really adore all of you. Let me bring the 2019 induction ceremony to a close. Thank you for being part of this wonderful journey today. Thank you for being part of this wonderful ceremony. I want to wish everyone a safe home during your travels. Be well, and looking forward to seeing you next year. Thank you very much. Good evening.